evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Coping Together Caregiver Seminar Series 2021. This is our third out of 6 presentations. So again, for many that have joined us before, again, really appreciate you joining us tonight again. So tonight we're presenting on finding the calm in the midst of emotional storm, and Beth Moretto, the social worker from Maryvale, will be presenting on this. I just want to actually hand it over to Beth, and we'll see another great presentation.
Thanks so much, Charisse. So this is the third in the series. And at the end of the presentation, I'll provide some information if you're interested in the upcoming presentations. But next week will be knowing when to ask for help. So just a brief overview of what we're going to go over tonight. So we're going to talk about what is self-regulation. So it's a word that you may have heard, and we'll go into a little bit more depth around what exactly those skills involve. Then we'll talk about the impact of stress on self-regulation. And then we'll look at, how do we support our kids and teens develop those self-regulation skills and cope when they're under stress. And then lastly, we'll look at how we can support ourselves in times of stress so that we can be that support to our kids. So what is self-regulation? We can think of self-regulation kind of like the air traffic controller of the brain. So it's really a set of skills that helps us to manage all kinds of different information. So it allows us to hang on to information that's coming in, to work with that in our brains, to focus our attention, filter out any kind of distractions, and switch gears mentally. So if you think of it, if you think of your child's report card, kind of that front page where it talks about things like organization and initiative, those are all self-regulation skills. So these skills we aren't born with. Nobody's born with this set of skills, but rather we're all born with the potential to develop them. And so through a process that starts in infancy and continues into adulthood, we develop these skills, and they're really shaped by our experiences. So we're going to watch a short video from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University that just explains a little bit more about what those core capabilities or self-regulation are.
Building core capabilities for life. Every day we take on the ordinary, sometimes challenging tasks of work, school, parenting, relationships, and just managing our busy lives. How do we navigate these tasks successfully? And what can send us off course? Science offers an explanation. We all need a set of core capabilities that we can develop with practice over time. Scientists call them executive function or self-regulation skills, and they help us to focus on what's important, to plan ahead, set goals, and meet them. They help us deal with whatever life throws at us and still keep heading where we need to go. They help us resist impulsive behaviors.
Hey, stop.
And change course when we need to. No one is born with executive function skills, but everyone can build them. We build them through a lifetime of making connections within and among the regions of the brain. Our brains begin life with billions of neurons, rapidly connecting to each other as we experience the world around us, making trillions of connections in just a few years. Early simple circuits form a foundation that more complex circuits and skills build on as we grow and have new experiences. These complex circuits, built throughout childhood and reaching across vast regions of the brain, make our core capabilities possible. The more we use these connections, the stronger and faster they become. That's why practice is so important. When we are children,
Peekaboo.
we practice these skills by playing games, learning teamwork, adjusting to new rules. We continue to develop these skills in adolescence by managing school and other things like work, sports, music, and relationships. When we practice executive function skills, circuits rapidly connect the prefrontal cortex to other parts of the brain. These circuits act like an air traffic control system in the brain. They manage incoming information and help us respond with intention, not on impulse. Threatening or stressful experiences activate different circuits, and those trigger automatic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. We need automatic responses for survival. But if stress is constant, these automatic fight or flight circuits become stronger and faster than our more productive intentional circuits, the ones we use for executive function and self-regulation. For anyone under stress, it's hard to call on intentional skills. If we've been experiencing serious stress from our earliest years, the stress caused by poverty, violence, or addiction, a chaotic environment, it's even harder. Under lots of stress every day, it's harder still. The key is counterbalancing those automatic responses by building up our intentional ones, by building strong executive function skills. The good news is these core capabilities can be strengthened. How? By redesigning our systems so they reduce the sources of stress in people's lives, by simplifying how services are provided to families, helping them meet basic needs and building on strengths. Because small successes lead to bigger ones.
Oh.
With less stress, we can practice the skills we already have and build new circuits for the intentional responses we need. Stronger brain circuits are built through practice in situations that matter. That's true for children, it's true for adolescents, and it's true for adults. Helping children build skills gives them a strong foundation for all that comes later. Helping teens build their skills propels them into greater success as adults and parents. And helping adult caregivers build their core capabilities ensures success at work, stable homes, and responsive relationships for the next generation. When our communities work together to help children and adults build these skills, we create a positive cycle as one generation passes them on to the next. And that helps us all.
So, as that video highlighted, when we're under stress, it really triggers a very automatic system in the brain that we sometimes refer to as fight or flight. So it's a really important part of your brain that's tasked with helping us survive situations. So when we're faced with a potential threat, it's really important that we have very fast automatic systems in our brain that prepare us to either fight the threat or run away. That's the flight aspect. The problem when stress is chronic is that that system is activated kind of over and over again, and it really overloads the brain's capacity to be able to do that more reflective and purposeful responses. So to kind of better understand what might be happening for ourselves and our kids at various points and how we can support them in developing those skills, we look at kind of three main parts of the brain. So the kind of red area there is sometimes referred to as the reptilian brain. That's our survival brain. So those are that's the part of our brain that takes care of functions that help keep us alive. So it's automatic. We don't think about it. It's things like breathing. It regulates heart rate, temperature, and so on. The emotional response when somebody's in that brain state is freeze. So that's, not responding, not moving, not talking. Then we look at kind of that yellowish area there. That's our emotional brain or our limbic system. And so that area of our brain is really responsible for detecting sensations, deciding if they're good or bad. That's the part of our brain that really experiences feelings. And so the response in that part of the brain is that fight or flight. So you see people having behavioral responses and reactivity or avoidance and running away. And then the green area of the brain is the neocortex or the thinking part of our brain. And so that's the area of our brain that's really helps us to reason, helps us to think through things, problem solves, all of those kind of higher order brain functions. And so the emotional response in that area of the brain is kind of that self-talk and a more top-down approach. So we're going to look at these kind of main areas, what they look like in others and in our kids, and how we can support people in each of these three brain states so that they can move to a more regulated state. So how to help when a child's in freeze. So when a child's so overwhelmed with feelings, their fight or flight actually no longer works and the child feels trapped, they might go into a freeze state. And so what that would look like for an outsider looking in is the child would not be talking or moving. Sometimes this can look like defiance, so it's really important to kind of look at the clues that a child might be actually very frightened and in this state. And so you guys are certainly the experts in your own kids. So being tuned in to those potential triggers that might give you a clue that, okay, maybe they're just very, very scared right now and overwhelmed. So in this state, kids actually can't access the parts of their brain that help them to reason or use logic. So it's really not the time to teach skills or to remind them of their strategies because we're asking them to do something that their brains won't allow them to do in that moment. And so how do we support a kid who is in that freeze state to help them to be more regulated and move to a more regulated state? So we ensure safety. We ensure that those basic needs are being met. We use a calm and neutral voice. And we can provide the child with things that are calming. So it could be a hug from a parent, stuffy, music, whatever you know to be calming for your child. And really tuning in with their response to see if what you're doing is in fact calming. So we're going to take our cues from them. So how do we help when a child's in fight or flight? Anyone who has had a toddler who's been in a full-blown tantrum knows what this can look like. So it's really not a rational state. So when a kid's in fight or flight, it could look like that behavioral reactivity, so that fight aspect, or it could be avoidance or running away, which would be that flight. And so again, it's really not the time to teach skills because, again, kids are not in that kind of green area of the brain where they're able to access those skills and strategies and learn new things. So our job as parents, when kids are in this state, is really that of co-regulator. And so being a co-regulator is kind of like being a coach. You're going to support them right alongside to help them calm themselves down. So if there are strategies that they've used before that are known and practiced to them that help them get to a calmed state, we're going to be there coaching them, helping them along to get to that state. We want to offer validation. So validation is really just recognizing another person's emotional experience. So let them know that you can see they're having a hard time. Again, we're going to try really hard to be calm and neutral and trying not to personalize the behavior because really when kids are in this mode, they're not able to think rationally or really plan ahead in terms of their responses. So we're going to try really hard not to personalize some of those responses. And we're going to ensure the safety of the child and keeping others safe as well. And then when our kids are in that kind of green brain state or they're calm, there's lots of things we can do to help them. And so one of the things we can do is to set them up for success with healthy routines. So making sure that they're getting adequate sleep, that they're having regular meals that are offering, the nutrients that they are needing to help their brains grow. Avoiding too much stimulation. We're going to try and anticipate some triggers. So helping them in advance know what their triggers are and coming up with a coping plan in advance. So, for example, if your child, is having a sleepover, let's say at grandma's house, and you know that they could potentially get homesick, coming up with a plan ahead of time of how you're going to manage that. So that they have that coping plan in place that they can use. And even just having a plan sometimes can really help alleviate some of those fears. So, maybe the plan is that they bring a special stuffy from home or plan to call you at bedtime, that kind of thing. This is the brain state that we're in where we can do that skills teaching. So helping to teach them skills to calm themselves down and help them to regulate. So things like using deep breathing, listening to music, squeezing a stress ball, those kinds of things. So this is really the time when we can help our kids to develop those new skills and practice. Practice is really, really key because that's how we develop these skills and are able to call upon them in times of increased stress. We can play games with our kids, have conversations, tell stories, help them to plan, all of those great things that build strong relationships because we know that strong relationships really help people to buffer the impact of stress. Some other things that help with those executive function skills that we were talking about earlier around managing different information that's coming in, helping to manage impulses and plan ahead. So things that you can do for really young kids and infants are things like playing peekaboo or hiding games. Those kind of imitation or copying games really help support the development of those skills. For preschool-age kids, that could be things like imaginary play, storytelling, matching and sorting games. So all of those things are really fun ways for kids to strengthen those skills. Then when we look at school-age kids, we can incorporate things like strategy games where maybe they have to think ahead and do some planning, organize sports or activities, card games and brain teasers. Games that require some attention, so things like red light, green light, where kids have to pay attention to kind of fast-paced instructions can really help develop those skills again. And then with teens, we're doing things like supporting them around planning and goal setting and monitoring themselves in terms of their progress towards goals. We're also helping them with things like study skills and time management. So those are all ways that we can support our kids in developing those skills as they kind of move towards adulthood, keeping in mind that kids aren't mini adults and that these are developing skills and that they still require lots of practice before they're really fully developed. So we know that these are really stressful times, and you know, being a parent can be stressful even in the best of times. So what are the things that we can do ourselves to help stay regulated and manage stress ourselves so that we can be that person who supports our kids and helps them to regulate? So I always like the metaphor of, you know, being in the airplane and the oxygen masks come down. The instructions are always that you should put on your own oxygen mask before you help somebody else. And really the same is true around stress management and self-regulation. So it's really, really hard for us to help somebody else to stay regulated if we're struggling to stay regulated ourselves. So it's really important that we take that time to exercise some self-care and to do the things that really help us to stay regulated so we can be that co-regulator and that coach for our kids. So important to spot our triggers. So paying attention to those things that create a really strong emotional response for you. So by increasing our awareness, we can then plan ahead to minimize the impact of those triggers and to help us cope. So, for example, if we know that, you know, dinner time and making dinner while managing kids and homework is a really stressful time for us, we can put some plans in place to help ourselves manage that particular time of day. And this is just a visual of something many of us are trying to deal with right now, which is, you know, managing work and home and trying to keep a balance between, which can be very stressful. Another thing that's important to do is really recognize those warning signs. So paying attention to those signs that your body gives you when you're becoming overwhelmed. So what is it that happens to you? So again, increasing your self-awareness puts us in a really good position to then exercise those coping skills and strategies. So when we look at those signs of stress, some of those physical signs might be things like tense muscles, maybe we have some aches and pains, stomach issues, headaches, feeling that increase in our heart rate. Maybe we're just really run down and tired, or we're noticing that we're grinding our teeth at night. Those are all physical signs that we're becoming really stressed. Some of those emotional signs of stress might be things like increased irritability. Maybe we're just crabbier in general. Maybe we're noticing that we're getting really teary or frustrated, feeling angry or overwhelmed. Those are all emotional signs of stress. Some of those cognitive signs are things like difficulties concentrating, memory problems, anxious thoughts. So some worry thoughts might start to creep in there. And we might be experiencing some self-doubt and negative thoughts. And then when we look at those behavior signs of stress, we look at things like, you know, maybe we're eating more or less or having a hard time sleeping. Maybe we notice that we're drinking more or smoking more. Maybe we're yelling, procrastinating, biting our nails or pacing. Or maybe we're noticing that we're withdrawing from our social connections. So those are all some behavioral signs that we might be increasingly stressed. And so then we look to practice coping. So now we know kind of, we're spotting our triggers. We're looking at, what are those signs that we're stressed. Then it's important to practice some good coping. And we know, like with any skills, practice makes better. So the more we use these skills, the better we become at them and the more effective they are. So and we'll look at each of these in a little bit more depth, but things like planning ahead, self-soothing, using healthy distraction, making sure that we're connecting socially, healthy routines, and really being kind to ourselves. So depending on the sources of our stress, we might be able to implement some problem-solving strategies to help us manage. So looking at, okay, what are those triggers? What are those things that are stressing us out? And can we problem solve some of those? Are some of these problems solvable? Do we need to create a coping plan for some of those predictable triggers? So the example from before around dinner time being really stressful, trying to manage making dinner and, having kids to entertain. Maybe we make a plan for, a quiet activity that the kids can do during that time. Maybe our plan is that we put dinner in the crock pot in the morning so that we don't have that same rush around dinner. And maybe we're asking our partner for help around dinner if we have another adult in the home. So those are all kind of ways that we can plan ahead to anticipate some of those potential tricky times for ourselves so that we have a plan in place to help us manage. Using time management strategies, so things like making lists, using calendars, I use my phone all the time to set reminders for myself to go off at different times. Whatever it is that works for you to help you manage your time effectively can be really helpful around mitigating some of that stress, and then asking for help. So self-soothing, for those of you who joined us in the first week, we talked a little bit about this as well. So the idea of self-soothe is really using our 5 senses to create a feeling of relaxation or pleasure. So for sight, it could be things like watching a travel documentary, going on a nature walk, looking at photos, looking at a snow globe, all kinds of different things that might bring about that sense of relaxation or pleasure. Hearing, so creating a calming playlist that you can play when you're feeling stressed out can be really helpful. Touch, so a hug from a loved one, could be curling up in your favorite cozy blanket or taking a nice bubble bath, snuggling a pet, whatever it is that activates that sense of touch that you find just really brings about that sense of relaxation. For smell, it could be things like scented candles or using nice lotions. It could be baking something that kind of has that nice smell throughout the house. Whatever it is that you find enjoyable using your sense of smell. And then taste. So using things that kind of force you to eat or drink them slowly is really the best for self-soothing, because it really forces us to slow down and be very mindful about the experience. So could be things like drinking a tea or coffee, chewing gum, having a hard candy, that sort of thing. And this is just, I love Calvin and Hobbes, so this is just a little cartoon strip here where, Calvin's had a really bad day and he has a little fuzz therapy. So he's using his self-soothing skills there by snuggling in with Hobbes for a little snuggle. Then we look at healthy distraction. So that's taking a break, doing an activity that you like. So it kind of takes our mind off of our problems for the time being and helps us to get to a more calm and regulated state when we have a little bit of healthy distraction. So that could really just be anything that you like to do. It could be, baking, going for a walk, sewing, doing a puzzle. Maybe you like to run or work out, reading a book, doing a crossword puzzle. Really, the options are kind of somewhat endless. So it's really whatever you like to do. We know that strong relationships really help to buffer the impact of stress, and we know that that's something that many of us are really missing during this time, or having to get very creative around how we're maintaining those social connections. But it really is very important for our overall mental health. So making that time to play with your kids, just to enjoy their company. Maybe you're planning a virtual game night with friends, or calling a friend or family member. Maybe joining an online group with others that share similar interests, online movie night. It could be, going on a distanced walk with a friend. Whatever it is that helps you to maintain those really important social connections. And then we know from last week's presentation that healthy routines really do help us to be kind of in that best position possible to kind of fight off those negative impacts of stress. So it kind of is like, what are those things that we can do that help keep ourselves kind of in the best shape possible mentally, so that we're able to, weather the storm. So things like getting physically active. So we know that physical activity helps us to increase those feel-good endorphins, and it also reduces stress hormones. So maintaining some level of physical activity is really important. Making sure that we have healthy sleep routines. So when we don't get enough sleep, our emotions are really just that much more at the surface, and there's so much less room for any kind of potential triggers or that sort of thing to kind of cause those emotions to spill out over the top. So looking at things like trying to maintain a regular sleep and wake time, making sure that we're turning off electronics before bed so they don't interfere with sleep. Trying to create a sleep environment that is really conducive to sleep, like a cool, dark room. All of those things can really help us to get better sleep so that we're able to cope better. Then eating a variety of healthy foods, so making sure that one, we're kind of topping up that gas tank so we have energy to help us throughout the day. And also that we're eating foods that have, all those important vitamins and nutrients that help us to feel healthy and help our bodies be able to fight off, the impacts of stress. And then we look at treating any kind of physical illness. So if we're unwell in any way, making sure that we're following up so that, again, our bodies are in the best shape possible to help us mitigate some of the impacts of stress. And then the last thing I'd like to look at is being kind to yourself. So really recognizing that right now we're parenting under very difficult circumstances. And so, we're all just doing the best that we can, and that's okay. So making sure that we're, being kind to ourselves and showing ourselves the same kind of compassion that we would show others. Noticing the pleasant parts of your days. So what we attend to and nurture really grows. So if we can focus on the positive where possible, that's really going to nurture those positive experiences and thoughts and help it to grow. Another thing that we can do is to keep a gratitude journal. So that's just around, recognizing those things that we're grateful for. It could be big things, it could be small things, really nothing's too small to include in there. That can really help us gain some perspective, and again, just helps us to nurture the positive, so that has an opportunity to grow. And then lastly, we look at turning our negative thoughts into positive ones. And so when we catch ourselves having those negative thoughts, asking ourselves a couple of questions. So one, is it true? And two, is it helpful? And if we're answering no to either one of those, we want to look to challenge that negative thought and replace it with one that's more helpful and true, more accurate. And so I'll just leave here with a quote that I found that I really enjoyed. There's no one way to be a perfect parent, and about a million ways to be a good one. And so if we can all kind of just be kind to ourselves and recognize that when we're doing a good job, that's great. And, not striving for perfection, because it doesn't exist. So for more information about the parenting series, you can visit the Maryvale website or the Public School Board website. Next week is knowing when to seek help. So, what are those signs that maybe you need some extra help, and where can you find those resources? And then I just have just a list of references and resources that were used to help put together this presentation.